Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome to a new season of Adventures in Compliance. In this season, we are going to review the short stories which appeared in the Strand Magazine from July 1891 to June 1892 and were collected in the book The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Over the next 12 episodes, I will be reviewing each story and mine them for leadership, compliance, and ethical lessons. In this episode, we take up the chilling story of the Adventure of the Speckled Band, which was originally published in the Strand Magazine in 1892 and was included in the collection of stories published as The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I know you'll enjoy this episode of Adventures in Compliance. Our story begins with a Miss Helen Stoner, a young woman obviously in distress, visiting Holmes and Watson at 221B Baker Street. She is worried about her life, fearing that she might meet the same mysterious end that her twin sister Julia did 2 years prior. Julia's dying words were about a speckled band. Helen and Julia lived with their stepfather. After hearing noises and seeing strange activities from her stepfather's room, Helen suspects that her life is in danger, especially now as she is sleeping in the same room and indeed same bed as her sister did before she died. Holmes and Watson travel to the manor, examining the room where Julia died and the surrounding areas, including the stepfather, Dr. Roylott's chamber. Putting the pieces together, Holmes devises a plan to ferret out the truth. Holmes and Watson camp out in Helen's room that night, and they hear a low whistle and metallic sound. Suddenly, Holmes strikes out with his cane at the bell rope, and a poisonous snake drops on the floor. Holmes forces the snake back through the vent, and it bites the stepfather, Dr. Roylott, who is later found dead in his room. In the end, Holmes explains how he used the snake, trained to travel through the vent to the sound of a whistle, to attempt to kill Helen, as he had done so when he killed Julia. The motive was financial, as Dr. Roylott would have lost a significant amount of income from the girl's mother's estate if they had married. Chilling indeed. I found this to be one of the most troubling stories in the original 12. It involves a clearly bedraggled family and distraught family finances, and a very imaginative way to cause death, where two sisters will inherit their mother's estate if they marry. The younger sister, Julia, had been newly engaged to wed and passed away on the eve of her wedding in the mysterious circumstances that I spoke of earlier. Her final words were, quote, "It was the band, the speckled band," end quote. Now, Helen, the remaining sister, announced her own wedding plans, and she fears she is able or will meet the same end. Dr. Roylott, the girl's stepfather and sole guardian, is a violent, abusive, and short-tempered man. He has prized collections of exotic animals on the house. He threatens Holmes and indeed bends a fireplace poker in front of Holmes. Holmes is not scared by this display and indeed unbends it and puts it in his original shape after Dr. Roylott leaves. Holmes discovers that Roylott has spent time in India and that he has taught beasts to answer simple commands. The low whistling that Holmes hears is the key. At the end, Holmes is ready for the attack and attacks the snake before the snake can attack him. There, the snake returns to Dr. Roylott's room and kills him. Holmes shrugs. "I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience." There we may have the answer to a question that is often asked about Holmes's sense of morality and humanity. He is not quite an advocate of an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, but in this case, he allows it to happen. So what are some of the leadership lessons from the adventure of the Speckled Band? Well, obviously, the first one is one we've looked at before, and it's attention to detail. Sherlock Holmes is known for his attention to detail, and in this adventure and story, he pays particular attention to all of the details from the original visit of Miss Helen Stoner to his office to the solving of the mystery. He solves the mystery by paying attention to small details that others have overlooked. And obviously, if you're a compliance professional, you should focus in on the details and not overlook anything that is important. Number 2, critical thinking. Sherlock Holmes is a master of critical thinking, and this is demonstrated in the story as he analyzes the evidence and develops a theory to explain the mysterious events. Compliance professionals and compliance leaders can learn from this by developing their own critical thinking skills and approaching challenges with a logical and analytical mindset. Number 3, empathy. I can't think of anything really more applicable to a compliance professional than empathy, but throughout this story, Holmes demonstrates a deep sense of empathy for the victim and her family and is determined to bring the culprit to justice. Compliance professionals and compliance leaders can learn from this by being empathetic and understanding towards their own employees and showing compassion for others. I would add the Department of Justice really expects this in terms of institutional justice and institutional fairness, which is led, of course, by the compliance function. Number 4, adaptability. Sherlock Holmes demonstrates his ability to adapt to changing circumstances and adjust his approach as needed. Compliance professionals and compliance leaders can learn from this by being flexible and open-minded and recognizing they could be multiple solutions to a problem. Courage. You don't often hear about courage for a compliance professional, but you may be called upon to speak truth to power, and that can be a professional danger for you. In this story, despite the danger involved, Holmes is determined to solve the case and bring the culprit to justice. Compliance professionals can learn from this by being courageous, standing up for what is right, even in the face of challenges and obstacles. And finally, communication skills. Once again, something that is absolutely mandatory for every compliance professional to have and to utilize. And throughout this story, Holmes effectively communicates with others, particularly Watson and the victim's family, to gather information and solve the case. Leaders can learn from this by compliance professionals, and compliance leaders can learn from this by developing their own communication skills, being clear and concise in their interactions with others going forward. There's a lot to this story. The character Roylott is truly one of the most chilling in all of the Sherlock Holmes oeuvre. I hope you will spend some time studying this story and enjoying it as well. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I also hope you will join me again next week where we take a look at the adventure of the engineer's thumb. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever great podcasts are listened to. If you are a lover of Sherlock Holmes and would like to come on an upcoming podcast and talk about your favorite short story with me, I'd love to have you. As you could probably tell, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I find a lot of compliance lessons learned in the Sherlock Holmes oeuvre. Adventures in Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.